Los Angeles is the second largest city in the United States, a media capital, a cultural powerhouse, and a laboratory for the progressive policy experiment that its supporters say represents the future of urban America. On June 7 and 8, 2026, the results of its mayoral race began coming in and the story immediately split into two parallel narratives. According to The Hill, the race has narrowed to incumbent Mayor Karen Bass against challenger Nithya Raman, with a third major candidate Spencer Pratt eliminated. But alongside the vote count, a separate and highly contested story exploded across social media: allegations from a prominent tech investor that the ballot process in California, and specifically the collection of mail-in ballots from homeless shelters, is so loosely secured that it cannot be taken seriously as a reflection of genuine democratic will. Tonight, we present both the results and the debate. Here is what we are covering in this video. We look at the race itself, where Bass and Raman stand, what eliminated Spencer Pratt's votes mean for the final result, and what each candidate represents for the future of Los Angeles. Then we walk through the specific ballot integrity allegations made by Naval Ravikant and what he actually claimed versus what the evidence supports. We examine Anne Applebaum's direct counter-response. We look at the broader California election law context and the Save America Act's fate in the Senate. And we close with the question that matters most: when allegations of election irregularities are made about mail-in ballots in homeless shelters, how do we evaluate them fairly? The race itself, according to The Hill, the Los Angeles mayoral race has narrowed to incumbent Mayor Karen Bass and progressive city council member Nithya Raman, following the elimination of Spencer Pratt in an earlier round. The race between Bass and Raman represents two distinct directions for the city: Bass representing the incumbent establishment progressive coalition, Raman representing a more movement-left constituency that has driven significant shifts in Los Angeles City Council politics over the past several election cycles. The ballot controversy erupted before the final results were called. On June 7 at 19:15, Naval posted the first of three statements alleging that the margin in favor of Raman over Bass in ballot returns is explained by NGO operators visiting homeless shelters and collecting mail-in ballots on behalf of residents and potentially casting those ballots themselves. According to Naval's posts, the ballots arrive at shelters, many go unclaimed, and operators would naturally wait until the last opportunity to cast them. He described the mechanism as essentially undetectable and characterized it as the most plausible form of fraud. At 22:15, Naval followed with a broader characterization, describing those doing this as far left and dedicated to this city's destruction, language that goes significantly beyond an election integrity concern into direct political characterization. He also stated that California's system will become every blue state's system, and the purple states too, unless it is dismantled at the federal level. By 1:16 on June 8, Naval clarified his framing in a third post: "People seem to think when I say the elections in CA are fake, I'm alleging fraud. No, they're just fake the way Twitter polls are fake. They may accurately reflect sentiment, but they're so loosely secured and easy to cheat in, it's not something to take seriously." This clarification is important. He is explicitly not claiming verified fraud has occurred, but arguing the system's structural looseness makes results untrustworthy. The direct counter-response came from Anne Applebaum, who posted video and text noting that the person making these allegations has called every displeasing election fraudulent, from Ted Cruz beating him in the 2016 Iowa caucus to a Virginia redistricting election, and asking why anyone takes it seriously. The first question that needs direct analysis is Naval Ravikant's specific concern about NGO ballot collection from homeless shelters a documented, real vulnerability or speculation? The short answer is that this is a real and documented structural feature of California's ballot harvesting law, known officially as ballot collection, which allows any person to collect and return ballots on behalf of voters. California legalized this in 2016. It is explicitly legal for campaign workers, activists, or NGO staff to collect ballots. The question Naval is raising is not whether the activity happens, it does, and it is legal, but whether, in practice, some of those collected ballots reflect the genuine choices of their nominal signers, particularly in shelter populations where residents may be vulnerable, cognitively impaired, or simply unaware their ballot has been collected and cast. That is a legitimate policy question about the design of ballot harvesting laws. It is different from claiming fraud has been proven in this specific race. A second pressing question is whether Anne Applebaum's pattern argument that the person making these claims calls every displeasing election fraudulent is a valid rebuttal. On that front, it is a relevant data point but not a logical refutation. The fact that someone has a track record of making fraud claims does not mean the specific mechanism they describe is impossible. Anne Applebaum is right that the pattern suggests motivated reasoning. Naval is right that California's ballot harvesting law creates a structural vulnerability that is worth examining regardless of who raises it. Some election security researchers have noted that the absence of ballot chain of custody requirements in third-party collection creates an audit gap even in the absence of demonstrated fraud. Senator Rick Scott's concurrent push to blow up the filibuster to pass the Save America Act, which he said proved majority support exists for federal election security measures, reflects the federal legislative dimension of this debate. Is Naval Ravikant's specific concern about NGO ballot collection from homeless shelters a documented real vulnerability or pure speculation? California's ballot harvesting law explicitly allows any person to collect and return ballots for others, with limited chain of custody requirements. The vulnerability Naval describes that collectors could cast unclaimed shelter ballots is structurally possible under existing law. Whether it has occurred in this specific race is not documented in this dataset. The policy question about shelter population ballot integrity is legitimate regardless of the political motivation behind raising it. Is Anne Applebaum's pattern argument that he calls every displeasing election fraudulent a valid rebuttal to the specific mechanism he describes? Applebaum is right that the pattern suggests motivated reasoning. Raising fraud claims only when the outcome is unfavorable is a recognized form of bad faith argumentation. However, the existence of motivated reasoning does not logically disprove the structural vulnerability described. A person with a track record of crying wolf can still, occasionally, observe a real wolf. The absence of documented evidence of actual fraud in this specific race is the stronger rebuttal than the pattern argument alone. For Los Angeles itself, the immediate stakes of this race are enormous. The city of 4 million people is still recovering from the catastrophic January 2026 wildfires, managing a homelessness crisis that is visible on virtually every major boulevard, and navigating the legacy of a previous mayor's sex scandal that led to Karen Bass's original election. Bass has governed under emergency conditions. Raman represents a younger, movement politics generation that prioritizes defunding approaches to policing and radical restructuring of city services. The outcome of this race will set the direction of California's largest city for the next 4 years, with implications for housing policy, policing, and homelessness that will be watched nationally. For California and the broader Democratic Party, this race is a test of whether the progressive left's organizing model-heavy reliance on mail-in ballot collection, NGO ground game, and shelter outreach remains dominant in blue city primaries. The allegations raised this week, whether substantiated or not, will fuel ongoing Republican efforts at the federal level to impose national standards on ballot collection practices. According to Rick Scott, the Save America Act secured majority Senate support during Vote-A-Rama, and he is pushing to eliminate the filibuster to pass it, suggesting the federal election law fight is directly connected to what is happening in Los Angeles City Hall. For the tech and investor class in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley represented here by Naval Ravikant and Gary Tam, the Los Angeles race is a proxy battle in the broader debate about whether California's political class is sustainable. According to Gary Tam, he has spoken with directors in City Hall agencies that literally hate capitalism, a characterization that frames the LA race as part of a larger conflict between the tech sector's reform wing and the progressive activist infrastructure that dominates California urban politics. For national Republicans and the Trump administration, the narrative of California elections being fake the way Twitter polls are fake regardless of whether it is accurate is a powerful messaging tool ahead of midterms, and the Save America Act debate shows that the federal legislative response is already in motion. The strongest counterargument to the ballot integrity narrative is the one Anne Applebaum makes most directly. The person raising it has a documented pattern of calling elections fraudulent when they produce outcomes he dislikes, and that pattern is a meaningful signal about the motivation behind the claims. She posted this with video, naming specific historical examples: the 2016 Iowa caucus, the Virginia redistricting election. She also posted a definition of mythomaniacs, those whose lies are grand, deeply embedded in their identity, and told with complete confidence as a frame for interpreting this category of election claim. Moreover, the structural argument about California's ballot harvesting law, while based on a real legal feature, does not constitute evidence that fraud occurred in this specific race. California has extensive criminal penalties for ballot fraud, and actual prosecutions for harvesting fraud as opposed to theoretical vulnerability have been rare. The overwhelming majority of political scientists and election administrators argue that California's system, while imperfect, produces results that accurately reflect the electorate's choices. The specific demographic of shelter residents, while potentially vulnerable, represents a small fraction of total ballots cast in a citywide mayoral race. And the fact that progressive candidates tend to win in progressive cities is more parsimoniously explained by the city's political composition than by ballot manipulation. Here is the detail worth sitting with. Naval Ravikant's own clarification tweet may be the most important post in this entire story, and almost no one is quoting it. He explicitly said he is not alleging fraud, he is saying California elections are fake the way Twitter polls are fake. That is a fundamentally different claim, not that someone stole the election, but that the system is so loosely constructed that the result cannot be meaningfully trusted even if no individual committed a crime. That distinction matters enormously for how you evaluate his argument and for what policy response, if any, is appropriate. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think California's ballot harvesting law is a legitimate democratic innovation that increases participation or a structural vulnerability that undermines confidence in results? This debate will shape election law nationally. Tell us where you stand below, and subscribe so you catch the final race results when they're called.